How's it going, everybody? And welcome to another episode of the Pursuing Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Gabe Peterson. This is the place where you can learn how to master your health, your wealth, and your love all in one place. So I hope you look forward to another great episode with another great guest. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that the best way to support the show is to simply subscribe, like, and share this episode with your friends. Also, if you want to get more involved with the show, check out our website at pursuinggreatnesspodcast.com. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoy. I hope you have your pen and paper ready to take some notes on some great wisdom coming your way. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the other side of the episode. And we are live. Today we have Natasha and Jachym, founders of exceptionalrelationship.com. They've worked with people all over the world and created the exceptional relationship formula, which takes away the guesswork and puts your marriage back on track for more intimacy, love, and connection. Natasha and Jachym, thank you very much for coming on the show today. How you guys doing?
Very well. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. I love it. So to get us started, why don't you tell everybody, who you are, what you do, and how you got started down that path in the first place?
So we are very different people. We come from very different places. So I'm Natasha, and I was actually born in Hong Kong, raised in Canada, but found this Swiss guy at the London Heathrow Airport about a decade ago, sat down next to him, and that's where the journey all started. And from then on, we actually had a long distance relationship for 2.5 to 3 years. And after some time, I thought, okay, we can't Skype until we have gray hair. So back then it was definitely Skype. So it's like, all right, let's do something about this. And I moved over to Switzerland, and that's where we were for a while. We settled down there, but over time, as you can imagine, it's one thing to go on vacation together. And that was what long distance was really like, with lots of talking in between. But once we settled down and moved in and got married, we started like any, long-term couple. You begin to have this ecosystem you create, right? And so over time, we start to kind of bicker at each other, nag at one another, there's some passive aggression, and then we just start to spiral down this path of really hurting one another without truly intending to, without knowing that we were, without knowing how deeply we were impacting one another. And so we kind of went into this spiral. And at some point, I was actually questioning, can I do this any further? Because I was such a yes type of person. Yes, you can do that. Okay, yes, it's your freedom. Yes, we're all ultra spiritual these days. So yes, to the point where I had my boundaries crossed so many times, and willingly. That's really important. I agree to this stuff, willingly, that I was looking at the exit sign and going, I don't think I can do this anymore. So what can we change here? What can we do here? And that was the actual pivot within our relationship. Until that moment, until I wanted to quit, we were still on that road. So that was a moment where we actually had those tough talks. We actually worked things out. We actually began to understand how a relationship works. And that's when we start to pivot towards a relationship that is so much healthier and so much more empowering. Because like everybody knows, in these intimate relationships, you bring out the best in each other or you bring out the worst in each other. Couples, it's like, oh, she's so nice. My wife, she's great. She's so nice. She's so charming. She's so funny with everyone else. And with me, like, I don't know how I activate the beast. So that's kind of what we had to do. Go from bringing out the worst in each other to bringing out the best in each other is a big difference.
I love it. And so from that experience, it sounds like, you're Canadian, Jachym is Swiss, and you guys, unconventional love. You met at an airport in Heathrow, and, you did the long distance thing for a while, and then eventually you moved in together in Switzerland. And as time went on, you kind of realized that you were starting to unconsciously hurt each other and spiral down. And so you knew you needed to change something. Obviously, it sounds like you guys were able to change something. You found the formula, and out of that, it sounds like you created the exceptional relationship formula. So kind of take us from that point onwards to the point where you hit that wall and you realize, like, yes, we need to change something. We need something to change in order for us to move forward in our relationship, and take us forward from that point.
Right. So for us, once Natasha actually spoke up and we start realizing what we are doing and how that impacts us, that is when the change started to happen. And yes, that was a pivotal moment in our relationship, but of course, there is a journey within that as well, that we saw coaches, we saw people to help us with this as well, because when you're in it, you are blind to your own blind spots, obviously, so
Yep.
you are dancing some dysfunctional dance. You're in part in denial about what you're doing because you have a positive self-image about how great you are as a couple or as a person. And so you don't want to admit what you're doing and how you're hurting each other, or that you have certain dysfunctional ways of relating to each other. And so seeing someone really helps. It helps to break out of that mold, and for someone to point it out and be like, this is what you're actually doing. And so this is how we then discovered the exceptional relationship formula, and we put it in so people have something to hold on to and see what they can do. And so the very first step in the exceptional relationship formula is to pivot. And so that is, for most people, it's a very uncomfortable step, because first of all, you got to admit that you have hit something that you're not happy with, right? That's usually where people are at. So I'm not happy, I want to go somewhere else. Now actually, this is fantastic. It really is fantastic, but in the moment you can't see it because it sucks.
Yeah.
You're hurting and you're unhappy, so it sucks.
It reminds me of the kind of the 12-step formula, where I believe, I might be butchering this, but I believe the first step in the 12-step formula is acceptance of what is happening as well. Is that correct?
Right.
So
right.
it's
I don't know.
Yeah, no worries, but I love it. Keep going.
Right. And so that's the very first step, and it leads naturally to the second step, which is like, okay, so I'm unhappy here. What do I want to create? So you want to dream. That's the second step. You want to dream. What kind of relationship do you want? Where do you actually want to go together? What is it that's important to you? And it gives you a very clear picture, right? If you want to dream, so you have a whole body yes, you're like, yes, this is exciting, I want to go there. But if you allow yourself to really go into that, what naturally will happen and leads to the next step is that you're, holy shit, like, I'm in this place which sucks, I want to go to this place which look like paradise. How the hell do I get there? You have a huge, missing gap, basically. And so that's where trust and belief comes in. If you believe, if you trust that it's possible that you can create it, that is what will lead to the next step, which is create. Okay, so yes, you are in a place that you're unhappy with, but now it's time to create your ideal relationship. And that means to look at the patterns. It means to weed out the behavior that's not aligned with the dream. And it means to bring the qualities that you want in the relationship into the relationship and embody that. And then, you start all over again. So it's an iterative cycle. You get somewhere and you're like, we're actually not heading quite in the right direction. So let's pivot and dream again and trust and create, and so it goes through iterations until you actually have a relationship that's based on your truth and that feels good for both of you. That is not coming from, oh, well, because everyone says this is how a relationship should be, or this is the ideal that someone made up for me. No, it's like, I feel this in my heart. I fully stand behind it. We both love it. And this is exactly what we want to have.
Awesome. I love it. There's a lot of things jumped out at me in everything you said. So going back to your guys' story. So, Natasha had spoken up, and at that point you guys started seeing coaches, maybe therapists. I'm not quite sure. I believe you said coaches. And you got that third person perspective, which is definitely crucial when it comes to relationships, because, I don't care how aware you are of yourself, there's always going to be blind spots. No matter what, you're not, you are you, and you can't see out of you because you are you. And so you need that third person perspective. And it sounds like that's exactly what kind of shook your guys' ground and got you out of that little rut that you had been in. And it led you to create the exceptional relationship formula, which it sounds like There's 3 steps: pivot, dream, and create. Pivot is accepting where you're at. Dreaming is deciding where you want to go, and then creating
then you trust in between. So you pivot, dream, and then you trust. Because since you started, okay, you're pivoting, okay, you're dreaming, but then that's where the doubt starts to come in. You start to question before you even take any action. You start to question, can I do this? Is there a way to do this? And that's where the third step, the trust, comes in. But you got the rest right.
Perfect. Awesome. So trust is the third step, not create. I'd written that down wrong. And then you look at your patterns and bring forth the qualities that you want to have in your relationship, and iterate on that, as every relationship is ever evolving and ever changing. And it's never going to be one static thing. You always need to, make adjustments for each person's individual growth in that relationship. So that brings us to today, where you guys are at right now, and I love it. So let's delve further into relationships themselves. I'm sure you guys have a lot of good advice to give on many different topics within this category. So kind of, I'm sure you've worked with many different couples, beforehand, and you've seen different patterns that they've kind of presented to you. So what are the main patterns that you notice with couples that they kind of get stuck in while they're building their relationship?
Well, so the very first thing is that we have an idea that is reinforced by media, by movies, that there's a happily ever after. So you get started and that's just how it's going to be for the rest of your life. And that's not true. Okay, so that's a big mistake people make, because you have the honeymoon, and the honeymoon is biologically wired so that we procreate as quickly as possible. Okay, but you're eventually going to come down from the honeymoon. And when you come down from the honeymoon, that is when other patterns start showing up that you have learned from your childhood, from how you're coping, from your parents. And there's all kinds of different patterns that people are playing. One of them is a very common one, that is, you start having a power struggle. Okay, that you feel like, okay, I gotta assert myself, so I keep my independence to a degree. Okay, and the other person is doing the same, and so then suddenly you have those things where you're fighting about the dishes, where it's like, how you supposed to do dishes? Like, really, guys?
I laugh because my in my relationship, that dishes seems to be an oddly, like, I don't know what it is about dishes. This is just, for some reason we fight about dishes, but there's no real issue with dishes. There's so many other things to fight about, but dishes is what comes up.
Exactly. So it's symbolic, right? So when it's a very small problem, it usually has some kind of symbolic value to the person, of either some independence or whatever's going on. I mean, that's just an example. Independence, you can have all kinds of facets about it. Being supportive can be another one. If you do the dishes, I feel more supported, whatever it is, right? And so you're starting to, because you're not carried by this high anymore of the honeymoon, you have to actually start to learn, well, how does the other person receive love? Right? And how do I express love? Because how I'm receiving love and how I'm expressing love might be a mismatch. And actually was with me and Natasha. So for example, for me, physical touch and quality time, being together, is really important. For Natasha, me doing stuff for her and helping her with things are really important. That gives her the feeling of love and support. And for me, this is the last thing I want to do. And so those are some of those things that are coming up. But here's the good news. When you do actually resolve the power struggle, and you do turn towards each other, and you start giving yourself to each other, instead of trying to be independent, what happens is that you can create a synergy, that you become greater than the sum of its parts. Our energy together is combined are great. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 10 or 100. And that's the synergy that happens when both people come together and are in the relationship. And what you get is better than the honeymoon, because it's deeper and it has more richness to it than the honeymoon. And so that is what we want to help people with, because people don't know that. They think like, oh, well, once the honeymoon is over, you just go down, and you just bicker and blame. It's just normal. And actually, well, it might be normal when people don't know, but you actually can have a different normal, which is much more healthier and more empowering.
Oh, yeah, I loved everything you just said, and so I mean, it sounds like from what I took from what you just said, the people struggle with the post honeymoon period, that right after the hill, right when you get over the hill of the honeymoon. It's the period where your ego starts to flare up, and you are each vying for power within the relationship, and it's at that point that you really need to put your guard down and identify how you receive love and how the other person receives love. Does that kind of summarize to an extent what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, they are different things, right? And people can get stuck in it. Like, there's no guarantee if you don't actually look at this stuff. There's no you can actually spend the next 10 years in power struggles and in a negative spiral and whatever, right? And one of those things about the power struggle is about the love, but there's many other different patterns within that are happening.
Gotcha. So okay, the power struggle. So, what's some advice that you can give listeners and watchers who are stuck in just that specific area to, for one, to understand? I mean, they need to understand how they express and receive love. So, what's some advice that you can give people to figure out themselves how that they receive love, and then communicate that with their partner? Kind of how did you guys do it, and what's the best way to go about doing that?
Mhm. So one way to go about doing that is definitely communication, right? Because you need to have an understanding, or else there's just miscommunication, misunderstandings throughout the whole relationship, and that'll be the foundation of everything. But with there's just a lot of tips out there about how to communicate. Like, oh, relationships all about communication and this and that, and we do agree with it. But there's one step before the communication of what I need, how I want to be loved, how you can support me. Before that conversation even begins is the clarity you need within yourself. Because why do we communicate? Because there's something within us we want to share with the other person so that we can understand one another. So if you start from a place where you don't really know what's going on, you don't know how you feel, you don't know what you need, you don't have that clarity, you can communicate. You can communicate with the best techniques in the world, but you share the wrong message, right? You're sharing the thing that will actually lead your relationship into, even more confusion and feeling lost. So step one is to actually get clarity on what is it that you feel. And many people within relationships, not just relationships, in life in general, go, that was nothing. Like, oh, it's okay. He probably didn't mean that. Or like, oh, I'm probably making too much of this situation. It's like, no. Trust your experience. Trust the emotions that come up. Trust what's happening within you. Because that is data. That's information you can use to actually understand what's happening within you, right? So if you need more of something, you want less of something, that's for you to figure out. That's not the job of your partner. You have to get clarity within yourself. So that actually means that you have to sit down and be like, okay, what is happening within me? When do I get triggered? When do I feel really fulfilled and nourished from this relationship? Get clear on that. Trust that it's valid. It's okay for you to desire those things or want to set your boundaries or whatever it is. Trust that it's okay, it's valid, and that you can respect yourself enough to say it out loud. And only when you do that can your partner respect you, and then be able to share however he wants to love you, you want to love him, you want to love him. So that's the first step before any communication.
Awesome. So yeah, so what you're saying is before you can communicate, you need to really get clarity on what it is you feel, what it is you think. And I love that you said that. I mean, I'm by no means a therapist. I'm just an armchair therapist. But I mean, so many books that I've read have said that, in order for you to have a real deep and ever growing relationship, you really do need to start with yourself. It starts from the inside and goes out. It doesn't start by you looking at your partner and say, hey, so, fill my needs, solve my problems, everything like that. So you're saying get clarity on what you feel, and then make sure and trust your experience trust everything that's happening within you, and then communicate that once you've gained that clarity.
That's right. And if you're interested in the whole receiving and expressing love, there's a great book called The 5 Love Languages. It's been written by a pastor, I believe, and that's been it's a really nice framework. It's quite simple and straightforward, but there's, I think, 5 different love languages, and it's just a really nice framework for people to think in and to be like, oh, yeah, it's actually true. I do like to receive gifts. That's actually what makes me valued the most, or whatever. So there's those different love languages. So if you want to dive into that, look at that. It's called the 5 Love Languages.
Awesome, man. You're jumping the gun at the end of the show. That's one of the questions I always ask is a book recommendation. So the 5 Love Languages, I think it's something Chapman. It's a really good book. I've read it before. Yeah. So that is a great recommendation. We're not quite ready for the end yet. So I'm gonna move us back just one step. And that is, so say, it does start with you. You guys you've mentioned this. It starts with yourself, and then your relationship blossoms from that. So how about if you're a person that has had, struggles in your past, and you need healing to be done before you can get in relationships? For one, do you? I guess I'll say this with a grain of salt, but do you suggest working on yourself before getting in a relationship? And if so, what are the best healing methods that a person can use for themselves to make their relationships better?
Those are big topics.
I know, right?
I'll give some input in it, but just know that those are huge topics. So you can absolutely get into a relationship before you're like fully healed, or I don't know what, because that's a never-ending journey. If you're not in a relationship, take the time to actually look at things. I think it's fantastic, but it's not like there's no arbitrary, like some made up line or whatever of a threshold where like, yeah, now I can get into a relationship, unless you have like some serious mental health issues where you have a very hard time distinguishing between reality and what's happening in your head. Maybe then you're capable of being in a relationship at that point of time. But otherwise, if you are, a human being that's functioning within society, you can be in a relationship. And actually it helps, because when you are in a relationship, what happens is that some of those wounds are going to come to the surface. Some of those coping mechanisms are going to come to the surface. So the relationship is actually a fantastic tool to facilitate growth if you embrace it. And so from our own experience, there have been many patterns that I've picked up from my family I was completely unaware of. And I only saw the impact on Natasha, and I'm like, wow, what am I doing to her? Like, how am I actually relating to her? I'm being really harsh here. And it was just the way that some of my family, relates, is this harshness, this explosiveness that can come up. And they've learned it from their parents and whatever. And it works, you get your way. But if you get your way, you're harming the relationship, because it's not a me, it's an us. It's an us together that we're creating. And so in terms of resources and what are the good resources? Well, there's many resources. We do recommend looking for professional help. But if you're not ready yet, there's 2 systems I can recommend. One is The Work from Byron Katie. Okay, it's a very good system. The other one is called the Sedona Method from Lester Levinson. It's a fantastic system as well. Both of them are extremely simple. There's lots of free resources. If you go on YouTube or something, you don't have to pursue, get a book or something like that. You can find it and you can work with it. They are great. However, it doesn't replace working with someone to really, get into the blind spots and, some of those things that are more difficult to look at and to process. So those are things we can definitely recommend. And if you are not fond of systems, then just be by yourself. It sounds simple, but it means no phone, no laptop, no book, and no structure. Okay, what happens if you're just with yourself with nothing to distract you? Lots of stuff will come up. So I'm telling you this because I've done it myself. So this is a great tool of healing, because you're finally being with yourself, and then your head will go off and problems will start surfacing and whatever, and you can start really seeing what's happening actually within you when you don't distract yourself. So if you're into that, go for it. It's fantastic. I can recommend it, but it's challenging.
I love it. No, yeah. I mean, this isn't really for the intention of solitude, but I'll hike. I live in Seattle, and there's a lot of mountains around here, so I go on a lot of hikes. But during those periods when I'm kind of hiking out there in the woods by myself, it's kind of the most I guess spiritual. Doesn't necessarily have to be the word, but it's the word I'm going to use. Time for me when I'm out there and I'm just with my thoughts, and it's very cathartic in a way. So solitude, I can definitely see how that could be a benefit, especially in relationships. So the work and Sedona method are two resources you guys could recommend. Thank you for sharing that. So we are nearing the end of the episode here. I'm going to move us a little bit forward. We're going to go into quicker questions. First one being, you guys both have experience in life now. You've been through ups, you've been through downs. So if you could go to the Natasha, to the Jachym, that first getting out of elementary school or whatever the equivalent is in Switzerland and Canada, and give that person one piece of advice going forward, what would it be?
Right out of elementary school, huh?
Yeah, or I guess that wouldn't really be useful. Let's say high school.
Oh, okay. I think for the elementary school kid, I would say don't be so scared, because I was scared. And out of high school, I'll think on that while you do.
All right. Well, for me, what I would say is it's okay to feel. Okay, because when I was in high school, I was actually quite depressed and unhappy, and I was cut off from my emotions. And I didn't realize that till later in life, when I was resolving some things from my past. My father committed suicide, so that had an impact on me. And so it's okay to feel. Okay, you don't have to be scared of your emotions. I think that's the one thing I would tell my younger self.
I love it.
And I think I'll add a bit to the don't be so scared. If you didn't notice in this episode, I had trouble speaking up for myself and feeling that my experience is valid or as valid as someone else's. So not being scared actually means that you can speak up. It's okay if you have an opinion or your current reality is different than the person that you're with. Someone can disagree with you, but that's okay. That doesn't mean you back down the moment there's conflict. So it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to have conflict. It's okay to have differences. It's okay that you feel different. It's valid. So that's no reason to hide or to avoid life or other people or certain emotions. So don't be afraid of that. Yeah.
I love it. So it's okay to feel on Jachym's side, and then your relationship matters, or your reality matters on Natasha's side. Two great pieces of advice. So thank you guys for sharing that. Again, moving forward, you guys already spilled the beans on this one, but generally I ask if you could give two books, one for the topic that you're talking about, which is relationships, and then one just any other book recommendation, what would it be? Go for it.
Right. So we already shared one of the books for the relationship. The other book that I can recommend, it's called Understanding the Core Teachings of the Buddha.
Oh, good.
By Daniel Ingram. It's a great book. If you're into spirituality, I can highly recommend it because it lays out the spiritual path and what can happen on this path. Because part of our coaching is grounded in spirituality. There's a lot of value in spirituality in Buddhism that is not represented in coaching and Western change work models. They often aren't quite as represented there. So we're bringing that into our coaching as well. And this is one book I just recently read and I really liked it.
Awesome. I love that. And it's especially rings true for me. So I grew up. I don't want to turn this into a religious conversation, but I grew up in a Lutheran house, in a Christian house, and just didn't really fit for me. But I ran into Buddhism, and I just love Buddhism. It's more psychological, in my opinion. It's more I don't know, it just makes more sense from a spirituality standpoint. So not going to go down that rabbit hole, but great recommendation.
Isn't it great? Because the first book is by a pastor and the second one is Buddhist based.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's wonderful.
Yep. Good things come from every side. Okay, so we are at the end here. You guys have already mentioned the yourexceptionalrelationship.com. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what people can expect when they go there?
Yep, absolutely. Actually, I recommend that you go to yourexceptionalrelationship.com/understand, because there we will break down for you these 4 pillars of an exceptional relationship, the formula itself. And not only that, we created this really fun quiz where you can actually like test whether you're making some common communication mistakes within your relationship. So, it's one thing to kind of listen to what we talked about today, another to kind of go, oh, where am I? And how can I improve certain things? So check that quiz out.
Awesome. So that is yourexceptionalrelationship.com / I apologize.
Understand.
What was it? Understand / understand. So if you guys want to check out their work, go to that URL and you can take a quiz and figure out a little bit more about your own styles. So again, Natasha and Jachym, thank you. If somebody did want to get in contact with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You either go onto our website or you can also find us on TikTok. Our handle is Exceptional Relationship, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome! You're the first people who have recommended TikTok. That's great. My girlfriend absolutely loves TikTok. It's like, yeah, it's always on here. So glad you suggested that one. So again, thank you guys for coming on. I really appreciated the conversation. I loved everything you shared with us. For everybody who's here with us today on this episode, thank you guys for showing up. Again, the best way to support the show is just to subscribe, like, and share with your friends and family. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode. Thank you guys for sticking with us on another episode of the Pursuing Greatness podcast. I hope you got a lot of value out of that guest. Again, the best way to support the show is just to subscribe, like, and share with your friends and family. Also, check out pursuinggreatnesspodcast.com if you want to get more information about what we do and what we offer. I hope you guys have a great day and keep living in integrity with yourselves. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode coming shortly.